Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thought I'd do something different for you guys and do kind of a buyer's guide video for the Atari 2600, as I got quite a few of them now. A lot of four switch woodies that I've been kind of just collecting up when I can find them for cheap. The value's gradually going up. And then also some of the stuff that I've done to them to get them working again when I have had problems, which a lot of times has been real simple fixes. So anyways, I'm going to do this kind of sporadic here. I'm not going to show like the oldest from 77 up to the newest Atari 2600 that I have. So I want to start with the most common one to find. And also the one that I had when I was a kid. This is 4-switch Woody. Woody being wood grain. 4-switch being 4 switches up front. Which on that, they're only counting these switches as there are switches to the back of it. But that's the change they made from the old to this one. So anyways, back. Got your difficulty switches and your power supply jack, center there. And then all the way off to one corner is your channel select for 2 or 3. And then you got your controller ports. Some of them I found do have different cord sizes. This is the next one I'm going to show. Much shorter cord than this. But it's a little bit newer. More mid-80s, which this one's probably from like 81, 82, 83 at most. Anyways, on this thing that you hook up to your TV, for anybody new to collecting, if you find an Atari or any other retro system from this era, and it has one of these, unless you're very nostalgic and have to have it in your collection just to show how much life sucked back in the day when I was a small child, throw this away. They're abominations not meant for this world, and they need to be destroyed. These things sucked back in the day, and they still suck now, as you can find them in some stores. I have a very good dollar store in my town that's Asian owned. In fact, it's kind of dollar store, little bit of used stuff like thrift store, and then it's also a skate shop, so a little bit of everything in one place. They're the only ones in town that have these, brand new, and they're just as crappy as they were back then. What happens is you got a switch here that goes from TV to game. All it is a couple flat pieces of metal that rub against each other, and after you've done that for not very long, that will start to wear out and give you a really, really horrible signal. This being about as old school as it gets. This was usually the pack-in type you'd get with one of these systems, where you plug in the cable off the system into here, which would be your RCA jack, female. And then, yes, I'm really freaking old, I remember this shit. You either had screws on the back of your TV for UHF and VHF. This would go into VHF if you're lucky enough to find an old school TV that still works. And then these two screws are meant for like an old school rabbit ears type antenna, which nowadays is pretty much worthless. So this you don't really have to worry about if you want to hook this up to a really old school TV, as I have an old school 70s TV that I'll play Atari games on because it just looks cool. Otherwise, really crappy. What you want to do is go to Radio Shack if you still have one. I don't. Fortunately, my Radio Shack closed, so I got to get all my stuff online if I can't find it in a hardware store, as you can find them at like Home Depot or whatever sometimes, and they're cheap. If it's more than $5, pass on it, man. It should be under $5, especially for one that's just plain old stainless steel like this, where it's got this end to screw onto the coaxial port on your TV, and then this end to plug the game system into. Now you can find these gold plated. Those are a little bit more than $5 sometimes. I think they were like $6.50 or $7 at Radio Shack. So if you can find the gold ones, power to you. You'll get a little bit better signal. Not much, but a little bit. A little less static because gold is a better conductor. Otherwise, good enough. This will stop from having to deal with that box, and it will basically give you a straight connection to the TV, so about as best as you can get for coaxial. And I recommend that for any of the old school systems, especially if you happen to find an old Pong system. Those, love these. I've got some to where going through the switch box, it just sucks. I hook that up, boom, no static. So anyways, on these, just to piss off you guys that have spent too much on these, cheapest one I found was at a local swap meet for under $5. Just for the bare bones system. No power supply, no controllers, no nothing. Just the system. But really, really dusty dirty. Which fortunately it was just on the outside. When I cleaned it up, hence this might be it or it might be one I packed away, it looked near mint. It had just been sitting in somebody's garage on a shelf collecting dust for all these years. Otherwise, awesome condition. So you never know. A lot of times, man, when it looks like that, they don't want much money. I figure if they don't have the time to clean it when it's in their yard sale or whatever, man, don't pay much for it. If it's been cleaned, there's another warning to where it might be somebody that knows what they have and they're going to throw a high price at you, which on these, at a yard sale, I never pay more than $20. And it's got to be in good shape. Anything that's not in good shape, maybe $10 at most. If it's something to where I can either fix or use as parts. As I definitely recommend, if you're in an area where you see these occasionally, if you find a broken one that's really cheap, grab it, because you never know when you're going to have to replace a switch or whatever if you have any soldering skills. So, for me, $20 tops at a yard sale. Game stores, they've gotten ridiculous, man. You're talking 30 up to $50. The only thing that's good sometimes, hence, I think, God, I can't remember if my buddy John here sells them for 30 or 40, but he throws in about 10 games of your choice. So if they do that where you can pick out the games, definitely worth more money, because some of the games are definitely worth more than others. They start at about 50 cents value up, depending on if it's a really, really common game, up to ones that aren't so common as right off the bat. If you guys find any that are made by Avalon Hill, hence one called Out of Control, score. That one I have in my safety deposit box, and it's just the cartridge. It's worth a bit, because one of them companies, they only made a handful of games, so just not that many floating around. And a lot of times that's the thing on rarity for games. It's ones to where they just didn't make that many. Or sometimes it's just, no, don't know. So far it's been ones to where they just didn't make that many. It's not always because it was a good game and everybody wanted it and everybody's keeping it, so not many floating around. I've very few like that. Maybe for Nintendo, to where I've got some that are valuable. That's because they're great games and everybody wants them. But for Atari, a lot of times it's because it was a shit game or they just didn't make that many. So be really careful on paying a lot for the games, unless it's something you really want. Okay, next. Once again, big difference on the cord length that goes to the TV. And I didn't replace this. It came like this, which is weird. I've never seen one with a short cord like this until finding this very cool system. This is one of my favorites. Basically the same as the fore switcher, but all black. Nickname back in the day, the Vader, as it looks like Darth Vader. Maybe one of the reasons I like it is because of all that shit in that region over there. It was a cool system. This, if it's in great shape, maybe $30 at most at a yard sale. If it's in great shape, has all the controllers. Otherwise, about the same as a Woody, as it's common enough to where they turn up. So far, I've found a couple of them, but A lot of times I've turned down Ataris because around here, man, people trash stuff. So I don't pay much for them at yard sales. I just don't trust people around here. But from like a game store, sometimes they'll have a higher price, like $50 or whatever, because it's all black and they figure, oh, it's worth more. Which really, same damn thing, just different color. Okay. Let's get off the subject of outright Atari consoles. I'm going to show you the favorite clone in my collection of Atari stuff for the 2600. There's a nice amount of clones floating around. I've got one that I was going to show, but it must be packed away to where they outright tried to make it look like a real Atari, but it's a total knockoff, and it doesn't even play the games that good. I got a handful to work on it. Which I might show that again in another bit. Otherwise, back in the day, my favorite system of all time was the Mattel Intellivision. That was my outright first game system. Atari second. So got a lot of fondness for both. When I found out about this, man, and saw one cheap enough, I picked it up right away online. I got this through Atari2600.com. And my Intellivision system that I had back in the day was the Radio Shack Tandyvision 1, and then later on I had the Model 2, which I'm going to show you here. But it's this attachment. This is something that also Coleco did for the ColecoVision, and they got sued. Atari sued the crap out of them, and they won. Because it had to do with they weren't using official Atari parts, so they were able to say, this is something we made ourselves, even though it plays your fucking game, so screw you, go to hell. That's basically was it. So they got away with it. And then later on, they made another clone called the Gemini, also known, and this is only because of the stickers, the Columbia Home Arcade, which if you find one of those, you've struck a holy grail item. They are worth a lot of money. The last one I saw on eBay was over $1,000, and he didn't even have the original controllers. And just the stickers, that's the only difference. Otherwise, it's the same thing. So, on with the show. It's called the Intellivision System Changer. Plugs into the cartridge slot and allows you to play Atari 2600 carts on an Intellivision 2. For me, the best of both worlds. This is just too friggin' awesome. And it gives a pretty damn good signal. In fact, the same thing with ColecoVision on their attachment. Pretty damn good signal going through the cartridge slot. Now this, I got it a few years back, so I can't quite remember the price. I'm just going to say it was definitely under $50. He had it priced really good, and damn good deal. As you can see, this is practically mint condition. This hardly got played at all. Basically not a scratch on it, so really lucked out on that. Okay, next. Let me show you the final 2600 type system that they made. And the smallest, and another one, a lot of different variations on it. Mainly on this rainbow pattern that they have. And they also had one that was solid black, like the Vader. In fact, speaking of the Vader, before I forget, this sitting here. Solid black controllers, all but for the fire button. If you find ones like this, and the only place it says Atari is on the end of the plug, these are for a Vader. Otherwise, the ring that goes around the joystick there would be highlighted in orange, and then you know that they're for a Woody. Anyways, it's the Atari 2600 Junior. Long rainbow variation. Once again, it's in a box someplace. I also have a short rainbow variation where it's just under the logo there. Laser cut logo that stands out of the metal there. Very cool. Anyways, other than the size of it, total change on the switches. These, even though they're smaller, definitely something that'll last longer. regular old up and down switch there for power. Same thing for your color and black and white selection, and then push button for select and reset. And then the back of it, power jack, dead center, difficulty switches to either side, controller port to either side. That is your channel select switch for channel 2 or channel 3. And then instead of having the cable hanging out of it, you plug it into it like you would with a Nintendo or whatever. These, not really sought after from what I've found. So if it's really pricey and you find one, pass on it. This one being one of my nicest. I think I paid like $10 for this. Swap meet, the cheapest one I found was $5. And I think that was my short rainbow version, and it's in awesome condition. Just didn't get any controllers or anything, but $5. Okay, now back to old school. As the dinosaurs crawling further and further into the tar pit. And back in the day, Atari partnered up with Sears, and basically Sears made Atari systems, and the only difference is different type of wood grain, which I happen to like better. These are really cool looking to me. And then the panel for your front switches, different background. So it's basically they had their name on it, but they're still made by Atari. It just has Sears' name on it also. Anyways, this is a Light Sixer. They just called it the Video Arcade. Telegames. Light Sixer being that this bottom half is the usual thickness for a Sixer, real thin. And then the back of it. Cord pretty much hangs in the same place as a 4 switch. It's just instead of having your controller ports up here, they're down here. There's where you plug in your power, and then left and right controller. This one, get it under the light here. I don't see it. Some of these, this is what's weird. I don't know why they did it. Maybe it was so if they could swap parts easy, but there is a cutout right there, and it just says channel select AB, so 2, 3. Some of them you can see a switch in there to where you can get like a screwdriver or pencil and get it in there and flip the switch. And then some of them don't have it, but they still have the cutout for it, to where those are strictly channel 2, which is the next one I'm going to show you. No channel switch on it. This one, I'd have to open it up. Sometimes if you open it up, they'll just have that switch in a weird place. And this one, for one in awesome shape, I mean awesome shape, $50 tops. Because older systems, so more likely to fail or be worn out, which this one, fortunately, it didn't get much play. It just looks old. And some of them, these will stay shiny. Some of them, they'll get that kind of just dull aluminum look to them, which you can just go over them with some steel wool and polish them up. Otherwise, this one's seen a lot of good homes that have taken care of it, obviously. Now for my favorite. Set it there. Running out of places to set stuff. This is the last one I'm going to show you guys. This is a Sears Telegames Heavy Sixer. And on the heavy part, on the guts, it's made the same way is a regular 6-switch Atari, to where the innards are encased in metal, which makes it kind of heavy, but what adds to this one, as you can see, this bottom half is really thick plastic. And that's not hollowed out, that is solid, thick plastic. So it's got some weight to it. And then the back of it is a little bit different here. It's the cord, instead of it just kind of hanging off of a little hole cut in it, it's literally got a plug that's rubberized that fits in there into a larger hole. And then the cord hangs out of that, kind of to keep it in place. Everything is centered on the bottom, like the other one, where you got your controller ports, your little jack for your power supply. Let's see. This one, same thing, it's got a cutout on the bottom of it for a channel select switch, but I believe I've opened this one up and found nothing, so it's strictly channel 2. That's the same thing on the original Atari brand ones. A lot of these have no channel select switch, so just try channel 2 if you're able to find one. Okay, now on what I've had to do to get some of these working. Right off the bat, I always recommend this stuff when I'm talking about repairing things. It has saved my ass a lot of times on getting these old retro systems to work. Mainly on the cartridge slots. Good stuff to have around, just to spray in the cartridge slot if you got in an area that gets a lot of dust or whatever. It's like an instant clean, but it's a CRC contact cleaner. Used to say go to the hardware store to get it, but I found out that Walmart sells it in their auto parts area. So check there. You can get it a lot cheaper. Say about $7 for a large spray can of it. And they make different types. This one, big red can. Picture on it is a couple of plug-ins, male and female, and it's like they're going together because it's more for like if you're going to plug something together like a cord or whatever, it's so you can clean the contacts to make it work better. Otherwise, make sure it's the type that says safe for plastic, because some of it's not if you get the wrong type. Otherwise, the stuff that's safe for plastic, you give it a little spritz. It's just enough to clean it, and then it dries instantaneously. So it's something to where if it's really dirty, you can spray the living crap out of it, and then it will eventually evaporate. But a lot of times when I've gotten these, the only reason they're not working is because it is so dirty that all the contacts have got dust and gunk and stuff on them, so it can't get any electricity flowing through it. So what I'll do is open it all up, take it all apart, not literally take stuff off the circuit board, but just separate everything. Unless you've got ones like this that have the stickers on the bottom, which if they do, try and preserve them. Just clean it by hand and be very careful, as the stickers do add to the value to give the serial numbers and stuff. But if the stickers are off, take anything like the circuit board off the bottom half, wash this like you're washing your dishes. Top half on any of them, just take it, wash it like you're going to wash dishes. Then on the switches, that's where I've run into different variations. Not only did they make a lot of them, they were made in a lot of different countries and stuff. So some of the switches are better than others. The hardest ones I've gotten, and this I think is only on one of my systems that I've ran into, to where when I opened it up, these switches, they were all closed up in a little box, to where I had to literally spray around the switch itself so it would get in there and then work it. But I couldn't see if it was cleaning anything or not. But most of these, the switches are open-ended, and you'll have 2 contacts at each end. This has to hit. Those are where they get gummed up. So use the spray, and then if you have to, use some ear swabs. Just carefully clean those little contacts. There'll just be a couple of bumps. And be very careful, because some of them, like I say, are built different, cheaper than others, to where to be like a piece of metal on springs that hits against it. So you don't want to hit the wrong thing, but just carefully clean off all the dust and grime. A lot of times that'll get them up and running. Otherwise, definitely check this when you're out looking for one. Cables like this, unravel it, look down the entire cable, and make sure there's no areas where this outer coating has come off to where it's exposing wire. Because if there's wire exposed, even if it's still intact, you're going to get a really crappy signal. That's why they cover these. You'll get a lot of interference going through that RF. And you'll have to just replace it, which all of these, you can open it up and replace this cable. It's just trying to find one that's got the right kind of jack to where some of them, it's a little jack that's straight on the circuit board, like just soldered into it straight up and down to where this center pin here will be shorter. Where the worst thing I've had to do is cut the end off of one of them and then just put a drop of solder down the center so it won't stand out too much. Otherwise, I've had some to where they're off to one side, so it's a little easy to work with. It just depends on where it was made, as there are quite a few different variations on the circuit boards. Then another thing I've ran into, which sometimes you can fix, sometimes you can't because it's just wore out or something's broken. Where you plug in the power supply in that little hole there, it's all encased in a little square of plastic. Sometimes they'll be solid black, sometimes they'll be clear plastic with just a little side piece that's glued on via pegs to where you can break the little pegs off and then just re-glue it. But what happened is because it's like a headphone jack, there's a little bar in there that's bent that pushes against it, and that's what makes it fit in tight. Just over time, it'll get bent down to where that thing is just slide in and out. And if you get one like that, man, you don't know what to do. Just pass on it. But sometimes you can get in there and just carefully, and I mean really, really carefully, lift it up with like a small Phillips head screwdriver and see if you can get it rebent right so it fits in tight. Doesn't have to be really tight on the fit, just enough to where the jack stays in there and it hits in the right place. Otherwise, the worst thing is that I have had a couple of them to where that piece is just snapped off to where I've had to really replace the whole thing, as in get another broken Atari and swap parts. Which, same thing on switches. I've had some to where the Atari looks great, and then I got one that I find that looks like a piece of crap, to where it's like, okay, I'm going to salvage parts off the crappy looking one and fix up the good one. And then that, you got to have some soldering skills. Otherwise, I say it's usually just a really good cleaning on any of these old retro systems. Worst thing I've had is I picked one up at my Goodwill. I either paid $10 or $50. It wasn't real expensive, but it was disappointing. It was an original Atari 6-switch, and it looked really nice. I figured, oh wow, score, man. Got it home, totally dead. It wasn't the switches or anything. I believe somebody had plugged it in and just fried it, like left it turned on overnight to where it just cooked itself. So, I'm going to make this video insanely long, as now I'm creeping into 30 minutes. Another thing to bring up, try and make sure that it's got a power supply with it. A lot of times at yard sales, I'll find them where they're missing the power supply. And on that, if you're in an area where you got thrift stores or swap meet or whatever, a lot of times the thrift stores will have bins just full of random power supplies. Go through them. Even if you're not looking for an Atari power supply, go through those bins, because a lot of times you'll find ones for retro systems like Nintendo and stuff, and they're worth picking up. I get them anytime I find them. And with my thrift stores, a lot of times I'll spend like 50 cents on a power supply for Nintendo, where if you went to a game store, you're going to spend $5 or more for the same damn thing. And then don't have one to show you guys, but You can find old school ones occasionally. You're still dealing with something old school, so make sure it's in good shape, like no frays in the wire. But they did make some variable ones back in the day to where the main plug that's got the jacks on it, which I believe it's the Atari sized headphone type jack, and then a smaller one for like Pong systems, and then two more common, and it'd be crossed like this, and then a lot of times we'll have an extra cord hanging off of it with like something that would plug into a 9-volt battery type thing. And then you'll have a switch on it for changing the voltage, and then you'll have another switch to change the polarity. So, final thing. And these damn cords, man, I've found a lot of different variations of these Atari cords. This one I keep with my good Vader system because it's a complete system that I have. Everything's original. That, yeah, it's still in good shape, but that is an abomination. I haven't measured it, but it is insanely long. Too damn long. They did make some later on that were a bit shorter. Maybe like 10 foot at most. This is just crazy. This is something to wear. If you don't trip on it, your cat's going to chew on it or another animal. To where it's just, you're bound and determined to get a break in it somewhere. This is what I had as a kid, and I was constantly having to repair it because we get snagged on stuff, tripped over, whatever, man. Otherwise, I will give the voltage here. Output is 9 volt DC 500 mA. On the polarity, for the symbol to where it shows the little dot in the center. Try and get close here. Sorry about that not focusing in good. I don't know. Can't get it any better on this Apple, but anyways. Try and point at it here. Right in that area there, where it shows the plus and the minus. Anyways, the center is positive. The outside is negative. You want to make sure it's like that, which most of the ones that I find that have this kind of a headphone style jack are pretty much 9 volt, man. The only ones I've found that are lower voltage, like maybe 6 or 5 volt, are the ones with the smaller size jack, which if you find one of those that's Atari, it's probably for one of the original Atari Pongs. Which, same thing, man. If you find one, grab it if it's cheap. So those are getting really scarce to find. Now that I can close this. One more thing to show you guys. That's, I don't know on rarity, but it's definitely scarce. This is an Atari travel case for a 2600. If you guys find one of these for cheap, power to you, man. They're starting to get a bit valuable. I believe it's designed to hold a fore switcher, and then it holds some games and your controllers and power supply all in one. It keeps everything nice, and it's nice thick plastic. It's just on the games, unless it's outright Atari carts. It can be a pain in the ass to close. Instead of sitting here for another 30 minutes trying to get this closed right, put an end to this vid now that I'm creeping up to 35 minutes and hate to see how big this file is going to be. Have a good one, everybody, and good luck on your collecting.